Thomas and the Magic Railroad. The only movie from this franchise to get reviewed by people outside the fandom because it was the only one to get a worldwide theatrical release. If it weren't for that, no one outside the community would bat an eye to any of these Thomas movies. In a way, we do have Magic Railroad to thank for that. It's just unfortunate that most of those reviews both in and outside the fandom are negative. And for good reason. I'll come out and say it now that while I do have my share of issues with this film too, I don't hate it. In fact, I actually like it. It does, spoilers, rank pretty low on my list for Thomas movies, but I still wouldn't go out of my heart to say it's bad or even okay. That's all I'll say for right now. By the end, I'll give my full opinion. Now, if you watch my re-review of The Adventure Begins from earlier this year, I stated that for this movie, as well as calling out Engines and Soder's Legend of Lost Treasure, that I had reviewed them before, but on my community post, and obviously none of you guys either knew or remember that. So this year, I'm finally going to be making video reviews of each movie. I initially aimed to get my review on Magic Railroad out by its UK anniversary on the 14th, but I decided to delay it to the US anniversary date to give myself some extra time to write the script. The same goes for Lost Treasure, which I was going to do for the 17th, but now I'm holding back till the 9th of August. Like my Adventure Begins review, I'm going to be skipping my recap of the movie because I'm sure everyone in my audience who is watching this, which sure as hell ain't going to be a lot because I don't put too much effort into these, have watched already. And besides, it's freaking Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Everyone and their mother and pets and even the boulder have watched it. Who hasn't? It's probably like in the top 10 for most widely well-known things related to Thomas. For better or for worse. But yeah. Going forward, I'm going to be splitting my thoughts on the elements of the movie into categories like The Adventure Begins. So, without further ado, let's get this review started. First off, let's talk about the model work. For being Thomas's first time on the big screen, the model work for the Soder sets is pretty damn good. Of course, it ain't perfect by any means, you're still going to get the occasional goose, but what piece of filmography doesn't have that? One thing I like is how they gave everyone outside of Thomas and Toby headlamps. I can't give a good reason why I appreciate that detail, I just do. Interestingly, Percy's the only one who gets to keep his from this point forward, though this was already growing prevalent in Series 5, and I'm guessing the reason why they did it with him was to make him more like Thomas. I think the reason why the others didn't keep theirs is because they were limited on the amount they had at the time, and they didn't want to give every pre- and future existing characters lamps when they were really only necessary during certain occasions. This is also the first time where the engines now had the new matte finish to their models. This was done to avoid any camera equipment being visible from their reflections. I'm fine with this change. I don't think I really prefer them looking glossy or matte. I know most prefer the former though, and that's fine. However, if you're one of those people who preferred when the engines were glossy and yet customize your Thomas toys or Bachmann models with a matte coating because it makes them look more realistic, there's something messed up inside your head. Not much else to say here. I'll talk more on the designs of the newer characters later during my character section, but they look great too. Overall, for Thomas's first film, the model work was solid. The music. The score for Magic Railroad was composed by Hummy Man, and I gotta give it to him, he really did a bang-up job here. The soundtrack he composed for this movie is incredible. I'm gonna list off my favorite pieces of his, but as a whole, I think every one of them is great. There's the main title theme, as well as his rendition of Thomas's theme by Mike and Jr., Rainbow Sun's theme, the music that plays when Burnett is introducing Patch to Lady, the rendition of Really Useful Engine, the music that plays when Lady is traveling along the Magic Railroad and then coming to life, and the ever-so-iconic Chase theme. While I'm on the subject, I'll also talk about the few song numbers throughout the film. The Shining Time song is fine. I think I prefer Doug Walker's version of it. Nah, I'm just kidding. I do prefer Maren Ord's cover of the song more. Hers was used in the end credits, by the way. I know How the Moon Must Feel is better, but still nothing to write home about, at least for me. Fun fact though, when I was a kid, I used to think that it was actually Lily or Mara Wilson singing the song and not someone else. The voices sounded really similar at the time, and they still kind of do, but moving on. Some Things Never Leave You is, again, a fine song, but just not one that isn't for me. I can get into slow songs, but this ain't one of them, no offense. The movie's version of Really Useful Engine is great. I do prefer it over the original, but I still hold the Adventure Begins version as my personal favorite. Summer Sunday is, well, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, is fine, but not a song that I find myself going back to. The Locomotion, on the other hand, thankfully is. I always used to be super psyched to listen to this song as a kid, and it might be the source for most of my favorite songs being of a pop genre, and that includes Thomas as well. My favorite song from the series is Streamlining. I feel badly for kind of dunking on all the original songs for this movie, but praising the two pre-existing ones. I don't hate any of them, they're just not ones that I'd willingly go back to listen to. But they are listenable, so they have that going for them. The characters. Before I go through the number of new characters that were introduced, I'll briefly go through all the old characters. I think just about everyone was handled perfectly here. Thomas is cheeky but brave, courageous, and takes crap from no one. Percy is shy and naive, but still willing to be brave to help out his friends. James is vain. Gordon is pompous. Henry is sick? I'll talk more on that later. And Toby is an old geezer who doesn't take his age to heart. Bertie, Harold, Annie, and Clarabelle don't do anything major, but what more are you gonna get out of them in a Thomas the Tank Engine movie? Now, onto the new characters. First, let's look at the humans. Mr. Conductor and Junior are the best humans in this movie. They're funny, entertaining, and the actors bring a lot of life to them. I've seen some people criticize Alec as overacting as his performance of Mr. Conductor, and to that I say, there's no such thing as overacting. That's just being a damn good actor and understanding the role you're in. Out of all the Mr. Conductors, he ranked second. Better than Ringo's, but I still favor George out of all of them. Going back to Junior, I think I like him slightly more than Mr. Conductor, though a lot of people already do. Michael Rogers' performance as him is amazing. Admittedly, when I was a kid, a lot of the words that were coming out of his mouth were incomprehensible due to his accent. I mean, I understood Donald, Douglas, and Duncan just fine, but my inability to decipher what Junior was saying half the time has to do with the fact that his Scottish accent was authentic. I know what he's saying now, thankfully, but it wasn't easy for me at the time. Lily is an alright character. I'm not too big on her, and spoilers, the rest of the human characters I'll be getting into. One of my problems with her is that she comes off a little dumb at times, and maybe I shouldn't be one to talk because I'm probably dumber than her, but like, she asked a random ass dog where her train was, even though there was a goddamn conductor standing right next to her. And then she barely reacts to the sight of tiny men and talking trains. Though, if I were to give that critique something, at least it breaks the trope of a person witnessing something out of worldly for the first time and freaking out over it. They easily could have done that with her, and they didn't, so I'll give them that. Mara Wilson's performance as her is also fine, however, sometimes her acting feels a little off. I don't know if that's just me. Burnett Stone, probably the most problematic character in the movie. Okay, I'll say this. I don't hate him, and Peter Fonda does do a good performance. It makes sense why he'd feel emotionless given that his wife died, but I do have to agree with the majority that he feels a little too mopey at times. He gets better once they fire up Lady, but before that, it's just like, make some other emotion for at least a scene. Peter did a good job making the character feel sad, but I don't know. I really don't want to be that guy who's like, it's Thomas the fucking Tank Engine. But can you blame those people? I can't find anything else to say on the character. I'm sorry. Patch isn't anything special either. He's just there. I mean, cool, he can ride a horse. But can Cody McMains ride a horse? Stacey Jones and Billy Two Feathers are the only characters from the original Shine Time Station series to appear in this movie, and Stacey's the only one to have their original actor Didi Khan reprise her role. Unfortunately, both have very minor roles. I think their characters in Shine Time Station were great, but that was only because they were allowed to be fleshed out there. Would have been nice to see Schemer, but what could you really get from him in a movie where his character probably wouldn't serve too much purpose? I am aware that Stacy, Billy, and Patch had more important roles in the director's cut, but we're not talking about that version. We're talking about the one that made it to screens. So the human characters weren't all great. What about the new engine characters? Splatter and Dodge, I'll be honest, I'm not too big on them. I actually prefer post-series Ari and Bird over them. I wouldn't have minded if they came back like Dieselton and Lady, sort of on her, but I don't think the show was missing out on not having them. Sorry, Splodge fans. Lady, I feel the same way about. I love her design, it's very unique, and that might have to do with it mostly being freelance, and I like that Britt Allcroft voices her. But as a character, she isn't that interesting. She has 5 lines and barely does anything during the time she has a face. Granted, this was already a problem that began brewing in Series 5, but my point still stands. And yeah, she's the apparent god of all the trains. Now, I'm not one of those people who wants everything in Thomas to be realistic. I never did. I'm fine with the machines having control over themselves. Well, maybe outside this movie, but I'll explain more on that later. And I'm even fine with them gesturing during the later seasons. But this is something that doesn't feel right. I'm sure you've heard this talk hundreds of times from people who have experience with Thomas, and I don't want to drag this section out any longer, so I'm just going to leave it with that. Lady isn't a good character in my opinion. I don't hate her, and the same thing goes for Splatter and Dodge. Their designs are good, but they're just not interesting. I guess I will give Splatter and Dodge this though. They're at least entertaining, which is more than I can give for most of the new characters in this movie. For Diesel 10, thankfully, he sits in the same category, but unlike Splatter and Dodge, he's not only a good character, but he's also a really fun one. That's basically a short reason why Diesel 10 never fell off and continued to be utilized by the show until 2013. Not only is his character fun, but his design is fun as well. This is how you incorporate something unrealistic but make it good. He's a big diesel train with a giant claw on top of his roof. That's hilarious. Not only does it make his design more eye-catching, but it also makes him more threatening. Sure, Diesel 10 is a typical silly villain, but he can also be terrifying and threatening when the time calls for it. While I wouldn't call this my favorite portrayal of Diesel 10, as the missing Christmas decorations is my personal favorite for how hilariously bad he's depicted there, this is my favorite villainous version of him. Overall, while there were some characters that I like, most of them are hit and miss. The voices. Regardless of what Hero the Rails marketing years later will try to tell you, everyone and their mother and pets and even the boater know that this was the real first time the characters got their own individual voices. And for it being the first time, I thought everyone did really well. Almost everyone's voices I think suits the characters perfectly. The Engines 1 through 7 voices are my ideal UK sounding voices for the characters, and I only say that because I still prefer their American voices in the US dub. The one exception would be James. Now, I think Susan Roman did a great job as James, and I'm not one of those people who confuse him as well as Percy for being female for being voiced by women. I didn't even think they sounded like women as a kid, and I still have that mindset now. However, I do think they could have left Michael Angelis as James. I mean, recasting his role as Percy makes sense since he's young, plus the voices he provided for the two of them are near identical in the director's cut. However, they could have kept him as James at least. I'm guessing the reason why, and obviously I know it was because he sounded too old, but it might also have something to do with James's voice being deeper than Gordon and Henry's. And if that's the case, okay, but why not find a male actor like Thomas's who's able to do a high, young-sounding voice? And I'm not saying that to diss on Susan's performance, as, like I said, I enjoyed it. I'm just saying that on behalf of those who thought differently. But I think all that matters is if I enjoyed it or not, which I did. Harold, Birdie, Annie, and Clarabelle don't have many lines, but I thought their voices were good too. How I feel about Lady, Splatter, and Dodge aside, their voice actors also did a great job as well, and Neil Crone absolutely killed it as Diesel 10. Though, admittedly, like the original characters, I actually prefer his CGI voice, but overall, all the voice actors did fantastic. The last thing I'll be discussing with this movie are my negatives. What is there really to say with my problems that hasn't already been said time and time again? Thomas is on screen for less than 12 minutes. Henry needs special coal. The humans are the main focus throughout the film. Apart from Birdie's driver, humans practically don't exist on Sodor. Not even the engine's crews. And while I'm fine with them having self-control, I do at least appreciate, the steam engines anyway, having a visible crew inside of them. The plot is pretty clunky, this movie is clearly a Shining Time Station movie in disguise, and the movie upright tells you that magic exists in this universe, and that's why the trains have faces, and Lady is their god, apparently. Now granted, there's already been some kind of implied magic in the world of Thomas with the existence of Santa Claus, but this is quite common for just about every piece of children's or non-children's media. The same thing goes for magicians, which we'll see later. But those, in comparison, feel subtle compared to this. Like sure, it might have been some kind of magic that brought the trains to life to begin with, but not in the way the movie goes about explaining. Plus, if Lady really is the only thing keeping these trains alive, doesn't that mean that if Diesel 10 kills her, he'll end up killing himself too? I know I'm not the only one who's asked that, I just wanted to bring it up because it makes Diesel 10 come across as more stupider. Going back to the plot, everyone knows the reason why most of it feels messy. It's because they cut a lot out and rearranged some of the scenes throughout the film. Honestly, I prefer the final cut we got, because there's a lot more scenes in the director's cut that focus on the human characters, and I just can't be bothered. P.T. Boomer was a little interesting, and while I feel his reason for being cut was stupid, like, how is this old man scary? I think they made the right choice to make Diesel 10 the main antagonist instead of a side villain. And you know what? I think I'm just gonna leave my thoughts with that. This movie has been talked about to death, and while I understand why, I don't want to be rehashing information that you should already know about. My problems with the movie aside, I do actually like Magic Railroad. I loved it a lot more as a kid, and it was my favorite Thomas movie for a while. I think just because of them incorporating real people into the universe. It made the world feel a lot more real to me, and that's something else I'll give to the film. This, in my opinion, was the most real Thomas felt because they had real people in the mix. That's not to say the seasons before or after never felt real, but the trains don't ever feel like real-life trains, to me anyway. That's not to say that it was ever a problem, I just think they felt the most life-size here. The green screen on the humans is done pretty well. There's also other stuff that I like about the movie too. Any scene that involves the trains, the chase scene, the ending shot, Mr. Conductor and Junior's talk over the phone with Sir Topham Hatt, Junior nearly dying twice, the CGI Thomas and Lady models look pretty convincing, and a lot of other stuff too. And even though it ultimately failed to appeal to a lot of the audience, I do commend Britt and the rest of the team on their efforts to make the film work. She had a vision, and she tried to make it possible to the best of her abilities. And though it wasn't great, it's nice to know that there will always be an audience that does approve of this movie, like me. It doesn't have to be perfect, just good enough to appeal to a person like me. So, I thank Britt and everyone else who worked on this film to help bring it to life. For ranking, this movie does rank pretty low. It's not my least favorite, that would be the next one. However, it's probably tied for second to last place with Day of the Diesels. I don't know which one I have more problems with. But my score for Thomas and the Magic Railroad is going to be a 6 out of 10. And that's all I have to say. Hope the 46 of you enjoyed, and stay tuned for my Lost Treasure review, which I'll be releasing on its 10th anniversary in Australia and New Zealand. And yeah, peaches. Oh right, I was supposed to talk about Edward not being in the movie. Look, don't take this the wrong way. I love Edward, but the movie really didn't need him.